The Maroondah Interfaith Network is pleased to present the third seminar in a series on compassion. I'm Philip Hughes and currently the chair of the network. As we start this seminar, I want to pay our respects to the First Nations people who cared for this land for many thousands of years, and especially the Wurundjeri people on whose land most of us currently join. The aim of these seminars is to learn about the various faiths around us, both that we may understand others, but also so that we are enriched in our own faith. Today we're focusing on Hinduism and its understanding of compassion. Swami Sunishthananda will be leading our thinking. The Swami is the resident monk in charge of the Vedanta Centre of Melbourne, a position he's held since 2017. He is a monk of the Ramakrishna order and has served as the principal of several schools. These days he conducts weekly spiritual discourses and classes and is an active participant in seminars, workshops and interfaith activities.
So now, what is compassion? Just first let us try to understand that what is compassion. So the general definition we find, it is something which is a synthesis of empathy and altruism. As Swami Vivekananda used to say, that most of us feel for others when we see others suffering, but that feeling generally doesn't end up in doing. So compassion actually is not just the feeling. Most of our energy sometimes is wasted only in feeling. But that feeling should culminate in doing. And that actually entails compassion. So compassion actually is empathy along with altruism, the feeling and doing. So that's the general view about compassion, that we feel for others, and from that feeling ensues actions, the expression, the way of expressing. As very nicely we find that the topic is perspectives and the ways of expression compassion. The perspective speaks of the empathy. When I can look from others' perspective, the other's suffering. Sometimes when we are not looking from the other's perspective, we become judgmental. But if we can just open our shoes and wear other shoes, and then only we can know where the shoe pinches. And then only that feeling can come from that proper understanding. We take the background of that person, the way he has been brought up, and the reason for which the so-called untoward behavior, which we find as a superficial expression, we, instead of relating to that superficial expression, we can go to the core of the being and relate with understanding, and that speaks of empathy. And once we can see from the other person's perspective and that empathy ensues, from that naturally, as a way of expression, the altruism is bound to come. So it's neither merely empathy nor simply altruism. It's the feeling resulting in doing that speaks of compassion. So, but yeah, now we will speak of the Hindu perspective of compassion, which you may find quite interesting. There is another factor which is involved in making the compassion something effective. In the words of Swami Vivekananda, we can say compassion is the synthesis of 3H. The alphabet H, 3H. What are the 3H? Heart, hand, and head. This 3H together entails compassion. Heart, hand, head. Now, heart we understand. That speaks of the empathy, the feeling for others. That's the heart. Hand we understand. It's altruism. That once we feel, that feeling now finds expression through our actions. Now, what this head stands for, that's the big question. So, well, head is the factor that takes the idea of compassion from the Hindu perspective. It makes the idea of compassion from the Hindu perspective quite interesting. So, this head, what it actually stands for in the picture of compassion, it speaks of equanimity. It speaks of a sense of detachment. Now, we may feel confused that how can a sense of detachment go along with empathy? That I am empathetic at the same time, how can I be detached? So as we always do, we resort to illustration. Here also I will resort to an illustration to explain that how equipoise or a sense of detachment is an essential factor in making compassion effective. And it has a role to work side by side with empathy. So the illustration is like this. Suppose a very well-known surgeon, accomplished surgeon, his own son has to undergo a surgical procedure. So though the surgeon himself can do it, will he do it? Have you ever seen the surgeon operating on his own son? However efficient he may be, it never happens. He will search for some other surgeon. Why? Does the surgeon doesn't have empathy? Of course, it's obvious. It's his own son or his own daughter. Empathy is there. Does he not have the skills? Of course, he's an accomplished surgeon. Then what deters him? So now you will understand. It's the equanimity. That's why in Bhagavad Gita, there are certain terms which is very interesting. While defining sthita pragya, a person who is steady in his wisdom, there very nicely they have spoken of one of the traits. There are various traits which has been spoken of there of a person who is steady in wisdom. One such trait which has been spoken of is anabhisneha. It's a very interesting term. In Sanskrit, the way they coin the terms is very interesting. You know, the sneha means love. Abhisneha means infatuation. So instead of saying just sneha, he's saying anabhisneha, means it is not infatuation. To stress the point that there is a difference between love and infatuation. Sneha is good. Sneha is love. That is very good. Abhisneha, what it is? It is the inordinate love resulting in worrying too much about the consequences or result. So now you will find why the surgeon never operates on his own son. Because he's too much worried about the consequences. And that way he loses his equanimity. And though he's an accomplished surgeon, he needs some other surgeon to operate on his son or his daughter, whoever it may be, the case may be. So this equipoise, I think by this time, you have really understood that what the role of equipoise plays in compassion. So this speaks of the synthesis of head. Head speaks of that equipoise. That we have, like the rein, when you are a charioteer is riding the chariot, is racing the chariot. The force of the horse speaks of empathy, that love. But that has to be guided. That has to be guided by the charioteer who is holding the reins. The reins speaks of that equanimity. Unless you can hold that, in spite of your empathy, that may find expression in some infatuation, which won't result in doing some good. That altruism won't ensue from that. And that's why you will find when our near and dear ones are admitted in a hospital, is in ICU, apart from the reason for infection, another reason for which the near and dear ones are not allowed to meet him in the ICU most of the time is because all the worries and tensions with which I go and meet him, which deters the healing process of the person who is in ICU. So there, my love is finding expression as infatuation. And that, in spite of all that love, that becomes a deterring factor. So this equipoise is very important, and where that head comes into the picture. 3H, that head. Hand and heart, we of course understand. The equipoise. That's why in Bhagavad Gita, we find that yoga has been defined as karmasu kaushalam. The yoga is skill in action, and that skill speaks of maintaining that evenness. Samatvam yoga uchyati. In another place in Gita, they say that equanimity is yoga. So thus compassion, according to Hinduism, is altruistic action, which ensues from empathy and is guided by equipoise. It ensues from empathy, but it has to be guided by equipoise. Just as we were saying, like a charioteer, the driving force is the empathy of the horse. Empathy is the driving force of the horse, and equanimity are the reins. So that's now we can understand that where that equipoise, a sense of detachment, plays a role in compassion to really make it effective. Now the question comes, how to develop compassion so that we can make it a way of life. Now we have understood there are three components: head, hand, heart. Now let us take the heart, the empathy. The first question is, do we have to teach empathy? Is it something to be acquired, or it is innate? It is within us. That's a very important question. That empathy you can never teach empathy. It is something innate. Even in the animal kingdoms, in experiment, it has been found, even the rats, the rodents, they have empathy. Other creatures, in National Geographic, there are so many videos you will find that the animals also relating to the other creatures through empathy. It is something which is innate in all the creatures. We need not have to learn it. As very nicely in Bhagavad Gita, it has been mentioned that once the Lord has created this universe, he created it creation was associated with the idea of yajna. That yajna means interdependence. In the inanimate world, where we see that interdependence is the thing which is the be-all and end-all of existence. Nothing can stay apart by itself. There's a constant intermingling of the entire material world is going on. It's a flow. The same thing is within us. That sense of interdependence which is been termed as yajna finds expression as empathy, which is inbuilt in our heart. When God has made this world, created this world, he has programmed us with compassion, with that empathy. I won't say compassion, empathy. So there is a nice sloka in Bhagavad Gita, Sahayagya Praja Srishtva. So in the beginning, the Brahma created humankind along with that idea of yajna, the interdependence. And he told that you will prosper by adhering to this yajna, by adhering to this concept of interdependence. So he made it a law, almost made it a law, that if you have to thrive, it has to be through empathy. So we can never break that. So, this entire creation, everywhere you will find, even in biology, they speak of synergy. That how the redwood trees, which stand so long, can sustain all the calamities of nature. Strong cyclone, wind, it never falls. It has been found very interesting. Its root never go deep. But in a redwood forest, whenever a small sapling comes out of a redwood tree, immediately all the other trees' roots will go and intertwine with that sapling, making a strong base. It's all intertwined roots, which gives that strong foundation and allows them and enables all the tree to thrive for hundreds of years. So this is just one example we are giving, but this is there in entire nature, even in trees, in plants, in animals, everywhere we find, wherever we are following this synergy, this win-win situation. You also win by cooperating, I also win. From that empathy is ensued. It is already implanted. We don't have to teach anyone empathy. It is explicitly demonstrated not only in humans, but in the entire creation. So the next question then comes, that if it is something that empathy is built in us, then naturally we are bound to be altruistic. And that's why in the modern biology, they say our genes are altruistic. Altruism is built in our genes. But you will now question that from where this selfishness comes. This question of this unhealthy competition comes. Where again, it is a lack of equipoise, which in turn clouds our vision. The empathy which is already there, it gets clouded, it gets shadowed because of the lack of equipoise. Again, I will give an illustration. Illustrations are the best way to understand that how that when we don't have equipoise, when we don't have that sense of detachment, the empathy which is already within us, that gets clouded, that gets shadowed. This is an example given by Swami Vivekananda, very nice example. That suppose in the packed theater, all the people are sitting there in the theater packed with people, and suddenly there's an announcement, there is a fire. You all have to exit. The fire has broke in some corner of the theater. Now we find there's a huge chaos. A few could come out, and the rest are almost burned alive, you can say. Now the question is, those who came out, are they more competitive? Most probably not. They were sitting near the exit. Some circumstances helped them to come out. But now the situation is, if everyone was equipoised, then what would have happened? Everyone, instead of rushing out, they would have maintained discipline, queued themselves, and easily all would have came out. There wouldn't have been any stampede. So it was the lack of equipoise which clouded their vision, the empathy which ensues from that win-win situation that was lost. That unhealthy competition came in because we lost our equipoise, which comes from a sense of detachment, where we place others along with me. It is not just a question of unselfishness. It is selfishness. I'm thinking of my welfare, but I know my welfare is linked with others. It is rather, we can call it enlightened selfishness. It is not a question of unselfishness, that I give my life for saving you. That's of course a very high idea, but that's not required. Here I can save myself along with you if we have just maintain a queue, a discipline. There's no question of sacrificing my life for you. So that's why when Jesus says, love thy neighbor as yourself, it's not that I have to sacrifice myself. I love myself. That is quite good. But I should love others just the way I love myself. The way I care for others, the same way I should care for me. And that speaks of the win-win situation. And for that, equipoise is a very important factor. And if we are not equipoised, we lose the sight of the rhythm which is already there. The entire universe has been created in that rhythm of cooperation, of interdependence. We lose the sight of it. And once we lose the sight of it, we should always know, we can never break laws. The Lord has created this universe with empathy. If I think that I don't care for empathy, I just want to compete and win. I favor that unhealthy competition. Know it for certain that we can never break laws. If the law is gravitation, can I say I don't believe in gravitation and simply jump out of a 20-story building and think I will be flying? It can never happen. I will break myself. The gravitation is a law. Similarly, this empathy is a law. I can never break it. And in our attempt to break this in the present world with all this unhealthy competition, it is resulting in my own damage. Research has shown that all the depression, anxiety are linked to a state of too much self-focus, a preoccupation with me, myself, and I. So now you will understand, in our attempt to break the law, actually we are breaking ourselves. We may be wealthy, we may be very much, well positioned in life. The people are praising me, but these all turn out to be just an advertisement. In the core of my heart, I feel I'm always depressed, I'm anxious. So that's the thing which we have to understand. We can never break the law. We break ourselves in our attempt to break the law. So it is the equipoise, the head factor of compassion that must be learned. That's the only thing which has to be learned. The others, this empathy and altruism is inbuilt in us. But unless that equipoise, we train ourselves in that, our empathy and altruism gets shadowed, gets hidden. So these other two factors, the heart and the head, this heart and the hand, they're innate. But they get clouded if we are not skilled enough to develop our head. So now the question, last question comes, how to develop that equipoise. So it is here we find that when we are practicing altruism, out of empathy, that altruism, it's find expression in all the service workers, support workers in healthcare, disability care, child care, aged care, whatever you speak of. Their empathy, from that empathy, altruism ensues. But unless we practice a sense of detachment in our work field, we are bound to get drained out. So there are two factors. When I am in the work, I have to practice to a certain extent detachment, but that's not all. I should have to find out some time for meditation. It's very important. Just to give an example, that two persons were cutting wood in the forest. One was taking rest and one was constantly cutting. At last, it was found that the one who was taking rest has cut more wood. What was the clue? How he did it? Actually, when he was resting, he was not just simply lying down. He was sharpening his axe. So with a sharpened axe, he could cut more wood at much shorter time. So meditation is like the sharpening of the axe. We have to retreat to sharpen our axe. That's the sense of detachment. So this meditation and the practice of detachment should go hand in hand. So that's very nicely in Bhagavad Gita, these two terms are there. One is Aruruksha and one is Yoga Arura. At the very beginning, I may not be that equipoised, but through this practice, that is Aruruksha, I'm gradually becoming more and more capable to develop that equipoise. And once you have become equipoised, now you need not retreat. You are Yoga Arura. Now that equipoise has become something like spontaneous. Your equipoise is spontaneity. You need not have to practice anymore. That becomes a habitual state of your existence. And now you become a real productive member of the society. So that's this practice of equipoise or detachment. That's why we find is so important for all support workers, whether it's healthcare, disability care, child care, aged care. Otherwise, they're bound to get drained out despite their altruism, which emanates from empathy. You will find it happens that with all good intentions, they're the one who gets so much drained out. It's a nice joke that a preacher saw a person about to jump from the top of a bridge. So he, being a very kind person, told, stop. He told, you don't know my agony. Then he told, okay, whatever you are going to do, you may do. Plus, please give me a time, just 5 minutes. Let me come to you. Let me you unburden yourself. I will hear. And after that, you do whatever you want to wish. I won't stop you. So he agrees. So this person goes to the top of the bridge and he goes on. The person who was about to commit suicide goes on relating his agonies. And when he finishes, it was not he. It's the preacher who jumps. So that's what happens, we find, in all with the support workers. With all good intentions, at last, they're the one who gets drained out. So there again, this practice for practicing detachment in work and meditation plays a great role in this respect. Those who have this practice, they can really be very effective workers. And now you will find that how this equipoise, a sense of detachment, plays a great role in compassion. And that's the thing which we have to train ourselves. The other two things is already within us. It gets shadowed if we are not having the sufficient equipoise. So equipoise is the thing which is like removing the blockage. Like when you remove the blockage from a dam, the water just flows in the field which you are cultivating. In yoga, in our yoga scripture, a very nice example is given. The farmer, to bring water from the river, there's a dam. What he does, he doesn't have to endeavor to bring the water. Just he makes a small hole. The water simply flows through that hole and irrigates his land. So that creating that hole is the the equipoise. That's the thing which is blocking the empathy and altruism. With equipoise, you create that hole. And empathy, which Lord has given us, altruism, which Lord has given us, it's already within us. That just simply flows. The nature has a tremendous power with which it flows, and it makes our life productive. So that's I would say, the Hindu point of view to explain the effectiveness of compassion. That how can we make compassion really effective in our life if we can bring that head factor along with the heart and hand. So at last, as a conclusion, I would say that compassion is a synthesis of 3H: head, hand, and heart. Thank you all. Namaskar.